And this is still the same link from earlier today in Slack, just above the quiz, if you want to join in. But quick reminder of ourselves. What does it mean to have a component architecture, a component mindset? What is a component in React? A component is a function. What do components give us? If I can call a function and I get data back, when I call a component, what do I get back? It returns elements, which they look like HTML elements, but no, they're JSX elements because we're writing them in JavaScript, so they can't be HTML. You can't write HTML in JavaScript. So we're writing something that looks like HTML, but really it's JavaScript and it's React's engine that's turning them into the appropriate HTML elements. That's what a component architecture is. You know, we create a nav bar or a main or a footer and we can reuse it. Okay, what's so important about the React DOM? Why do we need the second DOM, the virtual DOM, sitting on top of our original DOM? Selectively, and I'd even say, and quickly, render new content. So instead of the whole page having to remember like this has changed over time or this has changed over time, the DOM doesn't care. The DOM just says this is what it should look like now, and the React DOM says great and scans their whole application, finding the changes and swapping them out. So they're very fast renders. We haven't seen this yet, we've just seen refreshes, but we'll get to using the React DOM more interactively soon. So another property we haven't covered yet is unidirectional data flow. This is another big property in React. What does the word unidirectional mean? It only goes one direction, down. So what does that mean? Data only goes one direction, down. Should have kept this plugged in, I apologize. Fortunately, it's a quick job. Plug this in. So React has the ability, let's say we have, pull this here. We have our app component, app, and it renders out a nav bar and a main. And the nav bar renders some stuff, main renders some stuff. So in React, you have the ability to transfer JavaScript data from one component to another. So let's say we had a variable in app. We'd say const, maybe name equals Joe. And main actually needs to display that on the page. It needs to display hello Joe. But main doesn't have that data right now. It's inside of our app component. We wrote this in the function itself. Well, app can pass this down to main so main can use it. And this mechanism of passing data downwards, only downwards, you can't say, here, take something from navbar, pass it up to app. There's no React way to do that. There is a way to do it, but not the React convention, so we're not going to look at that right now. We're passing data downwards. I can pass this via props. And that's what this, all the props is for. Props stands for properties. I can pass properties, data, down to another component, and that component can use that data. And I can keep passing it and passing it. This is another thing, maybe this is a list. It can pass that data downwards as well. I can, even if the data was declared up here, I can keep passing it down my application. So this is unidirectional data flow, and it's how React passes its data around components. And the way to do that is through props. So we're going to look at how to pass data like this. Any questions on the picture, though?
So is props what you're passing, or is
Yes. Props is how and what. It is what you are passing and what you are and how you are doing it. So I should write a little bit more right here. Let me erase a bit because there's actually a little bit more we can show. So props passes these down. How does it pass it down? So let's say app is maintaining that name, Joe. Main needs to be able to display it. So I say app, you're going to have a prop called name, and it's equal to Joe. Well, whatever, let's say we had another variable too. We had const age equals 20. And we also need name and of Joe to pass down, and we need age of 20 to pass down. We can pass as many things as we want as props, and what React does, it says, great, you got a name equals Joe and age equals 20. It creates an object. Let me do this. With a name equal to Joe and an age equal to 20. What is this object called? Props. So we refer to the data being passed down as props. How would I get the name out of this object if the object is called props? Props.name. So when I pass something called name down here, main, if it wanted to display it in, let's say, like an H1 tag, it would have to say, show me props.name from the data it received from the element up above. Running out of screen space. Now there's too much ink and it's all the same color, so let's actually do code. So that's what props do. They pass data. So, unidirectional. I've installed a new Create React app with Create React app. I'm going to go in here and delete my source folder's content, create an index.js. Quick review, what two imports do the index.js need? Import React from React. Whose brains am I hurting right now? Help me debug. What's going on? Why won't this work? Okay, this got to be capital Dom. Okay, thank you. I was so confused there for a minute. Not really. Okay, I was. Document.get element by ID root. Why did I just put app here? This doesn't exist. It will. I just need to write it. So I'm going to import app from app, even though this file doesn't exist yet, because I don't want to have to come back to this page. It's all set up at this point. I'm saying, hey, you're going to use React. I need React DOM on this file to tell it what to render and where to render it. And where does the element with the ID of root live? Yeah, it's the only thing anchoring us to an HTML page. We don't touch this page though, unless we have like a font to add or something. So we're saying put our entire app here, and app is the top level of our application as denoted by this picture. Now we can start building other components that bundle together to make our whole website. Okay, so let's make our app.js component. And I'll say function app is a function that returns hello world, soon to be changed. And I export default. What am I export defaulting from this file? The app function itself. Does it matter the name when I import it? Yes, it has to be the name. That's how import works. If you want to call it something else, you can. You can say import app as unicorn. And now app is furthermore known as unicorn. But don't do that. Right now the syntax is a little weird. I'd have to wrap this up and brackets, and no one's happy with that. So let's just call it what it is. App. Stay away from unicorn. I'd like to see what this looks like in the DOM. So Moroni, what is the command I run in terminal to make this start? Is it live server? Okay, good. Space start. No, I write that because often when I'm talking to people, I'm like, now space, and they write space. I think it's fun. Okay. Yeah, npm start. Starts up the development server, and as soon as you get to this page where it says compiled successfully, voila, our website is up. I don't want this to say hello world. I want this to say hello to whoever's name is the property I would like it to send. So let's look at how props work. Then let's compare them towards functions to give them context. So app needs to receive a prop. If data is only given unidirectionally, what file is going to be sending these props? If data can only come from above, what's the only higher level file than app? Index, the thing that's rendering app. Yeah, so this is like the parent file to the child file situation. So I can tell app to receive some props here. Where I use it, before the closing forward slash, I can give key value pairs with equal signs that name props. So I'm gonna name a prop called name. Could call it anything. And set it equal to Steve. So I am now passing a prop called name. App can now receive it, but it's not been told that props are coming. So we give every component that's going to receive props, every functional component that's going to receive props, we give it a parameter called props. Because it's going to receive it, we just have to name it in order to use it, kind of like the event object. And what I'm going to do now is console.log props. And yes, this is a regular function, so I can do whatever I want before the return statement, for loops, what have you. I'm going to console log props. And when we go to the console, what data type is props? It's not this thing, it's this thing. Yeah, app.js line 4. And notice it has a dot name equal to Steve. It's what I passed in right here. So app is receiving it. So instead of world, I'd like to say props.name. But this does something funky. Hello, props.name. So we have to tell JSX when we're not writing HTML anymore. We have to tell it, hey, this line right here, props.name, this is a variable, it's not a string. Don't just print props.name, give me the actual property. And the way you do this is just by surrounding it in curly brackets. Now it knows it's a variable, and now it's using my data from above. So let's do an iteration or two on this just to see. So Chris, let's say I wanted this sentence to say, hello, Steve, you are 20, and I need to pass a prop called age. So I need this to work. Hello, Steve, you are props.age. Now it's going to break, or it's not going to show anything because there is no props.age. Where do I go and how do I make that show up the number 20? Where did I add the name prop? Okay. What do we think? We wanted 20, so that doesn't like that syntax. I mean, I guess I could send it down as a string, but that kind of limits me. So whenever you're not passing a string, if it's any other data type in JSX, the way to pass it down is with curly brackets. Now I can pass a number. It doesn't have to be the string 20. So I'm passing the string Steve and the number 20, and it immediately shows up. Interesting. Let's console log props again to make sure we see what's going on. So there's our props object from line 4. Now it's got a .age and a .name. So I could actually just keep adding properties to this. And as I do that, this object will just keep growing with more data I can use inside of the app.js component. So now this props object has a props.name, a props.age, and a props.isAlive. And I am props.isAlive. However, how come this true Boolean isn't showing up? I mentioned this briefly, but Booleans won't show up until you turn them to a string. And I am true. That works. Is alive true. That's just implied, I guess. Okay. So that was quite a bit. Let me shrink this back down because we're going to talk about why this works. The why is important here. And you'll lean a little bit on your knowledge of functions, how they, just the basic of functions, how they work. Going back to it, just like we did earlier today, let's say we had a function called multiply, a little different this time, same concept. It takes two numbers and returns the two numbers multiplied. Great. What's the difference between declaring a function and declaring a React component? Cool. And then in return, instead of returning data, I'd return some sort of element. Okay, so we're still just writing functions. And when I call this function, I say, multiply 20 by 40, and it returns their sum. Remember, if I want to call a component, it's this syntax. I use the opening caret, the component name, and then the closing caret. So that's calling a function, or calling a component. I'll write the similar syntax here. But here we're able to pass in arguments that the function can then use as parameters. That is what props are. They are function arguments. So if I pass in a 20 here for multiply, the same way I'd pass that into a component, I'd say number 1 equals 20, number 2 equals 40. And now app would receive both of these arguments, but they call them something special. They call them props. They're all bundled into a box for you. So if I wanted to console log both of these numbers, I'll add them as actual props here. If I wanted to console log both of those numbers in app, number 1 and number 2, what would I actually write right here? Cool. Right, so it's a direct data pass off. I'm saying, hey, you're going to receive something called number 1 that represents something, and here's where we actually pass it as an argument. So think function argument, function parameter. What kind of data is props always going to be? What data type? Always will be an object. Which takes us to the next thing. If you really want to do it, if you don't want to say props.everything, you can just say deconstruct everything from props. Let me use it that way. But we'll lead up to that syntax. That's nice because then you don't have to say the props word everywhere. Right now it's enough to know I pass data, I receive data, and use it. And I have to use the curly brackets inside of my tag so it knows it's a variable. Well, why is this handy? Let's look at something handy and then go from there. Might have to just go to the exercise. So let's get away from our hello world. We're done with hello world. We know what we're doing, kind of. Let's make a box.js, import React from React. Default box. Okay, so I've exported my box component. So I'm going to import it to my app.js file so I can use it here. And then I will put it in the tags. So I'm using one box component. How come I'm not seeing my div on the screen? Yeah, a div's height is determined by its content or CSS height. This doesn't have either. It has nothing to display. As soon as I put a word in there, it now has something to display. What I'd like to do in this case is pass a prop down that doesn't show data, but rather displays, maybe ties into a CSS class of some sort. Let's see. Where are we? Props. Okay. So we've covered one way for styling so far. What was that? Class name. So class names cannot be used on components if you want to affect styling. Class names still have to be used on the native elements. So if I wanted to style my box, I would not put a class name as a property here. I put a class name as an attribute on the div the box represents. So I'm going to give this a class name of box number 1. I'm going to make a style CSS sheet. And I'm going to import it on my app.js so everything's plugged in, ready to go. And I'm going to make a class for my box 1. So box 1 is a width of 200 pixels, a height 200, background color, Dodger blue. And my box appears. Fantastic. How can I make a second box show up right next to this other box without writing another, oh, I don't have to literally type. I guess I'd have to type a couple characters out. But I want multiple blue boxes on the page. 2 boxes. Oh, what have I done? What cardinal rule have I disobeyed? 2 elements must be returned within a single element. Okay, so now I've got 2 boxes. What if I want 3? I got 3, 4, 4. This is cool. I can just regenerate my code. I'm calling my box function 4 times. So 4 times this div is being returned and added to the DOM. This is doing the create element, add class name, and append child for you in one go. Every time you just copy and paste this code. What I'd really like though is 4 different colored boxes. But I don't want to change, I don't want to make a box 1 component and a box 2 component and a box 3 component. That's why you're using React in that case. You're having to rewrite the same code in 4 files. So how can I make this dynamic? I don't want the class name hard-coded. What allows me to give my component information from above? Props. So instead of hard-coding box 1 here, I'm going to say, actually, to do template literals, you need the curly brackets as well. I'm going to say, instead of a hard-coded value, you're going to receive a props.box class. I'm just making that up. Box class. Cool. Well, now on app.js, where I created this first one, I'm going to provide it that property. I'm going to say your box class is box 1, that first one we used. And it shows back up. It's inherited that class now as props rather than having it hard-coded. as the value. Why aren't these other 3 boxes showing up now? Yeah, there, if we went into the DevTools now, I didn't provide them a prop, so their class name is undefined. If I go to the DevTools in the root, here's box 1. It got my class because I passed the prop down, but notice the other 3 ones have no class. No class. Because props.class, box class evaluated to undefined. I didn't pass one down. So how can I make it so even though I'm using the same component here, I get 4 different colored boxes? I want these 3 boxes to show up, but be different colors. I know it's a stretch. What if, big what if I made another class, box 2, that had these same properties, but a different color? Say violet. How can I give the second box the class of box 2? Cool, I'll give it a prop called box class. Is this a reserved word? No, I made this up. But this is important because it's actually defined in my CSS. As soon as I give it box 2, the second one knows to show up the same way, use the same code, but it's passed different information on what it should do. So the first one got the class of box 1. The second one got the class of box 2. But it's the same code being executed 4 times. I'll show you one other way you can do this. Actually, no, I think this is enough for right now. Let's stick with this. This is good. This is safe. What about if I want a green box? Someone help me. Let's make our class. Something offensive like lime green. Do I need to change anything to my box component? Yeah, it knows that I'll just do what the up above tells me. So we go to the up above, give it a box class of box 3 with ending quotes. Hey. But now I'm going to throw things off a bit. I'm going to go into here and say props.boxClass. I don't like that word. I'm going to call it props.classybox. And everything breaks. How do I fix this? I'm not going to change this word. I have decided classybox is my new library. It's what I want to use. So how do I get my boxes to show back up again? What am I changing? Yeah, the name of the prop. It no longer up down below doesn't realize the box.js doesn't know what box class is, but it knows what classy box is. And they come back. So this is the key. This is the value. If you want to pass anything other than a string down as a prop, what do you have to use instead of quotes? Brackets. And you can put strings in brackets if you want. It's the same thing. If you want to use backticks, you've got to have brackets. Strings are the only thing that go down just fine. Well, what if I would, one last thing here. I know I got a lot of what ifs today, but this is very exciting. Box 1, box 2, box 3. We're going to make them flex boxes. I would like the number 1 centered in this box, or a name even, a second name and a third name in each box. I'm just going to get rid of box 4 because we're not using it. Okay, I want 3 different names to display, but I can't have it hard-coded. So what would box probably be displaying? Ryan, if you want to give it a guess. If the data that it's going to display is different for each box, where must it be coming from? Yes, through what mechanism? How are we passing this data down? Just like we're passing the style data down. Anyone can help out. How am I going to get different data down to each box? Yeah, right now we're just passing classes. We can pass more, sure. So what should we call this prop? Let's say this prop represents a name. What should we call that prop? I think that makes sense. Name. We'll give this one the name of Rick. We'll give this one the name Morty. And this one, name of Scabbers. Okay, now I'd like the name to show up in each of these boxes. So how do I adjust or add to this component to do that? Cool bike. Yeah, with curly brackets, I always want to show without it first, because no, if you don't say this is a variable, it'll take you literally. We don't want to be literal. We want to say refer to props, put curly brackets around it. Now we got Rick, Morty, Scabbers. Let's change the P to an H3 so we can see it. Okay. Again, this is still just one component, but being used 3 times, and they look like different pieces of UI because we're just passing different data down for it to use. One might be for style, one might be for display. Depends. But you will pass props everywhere in every application. This is how data is passed around in React. And it only goes one direction, down. Starting at index, but usually we don't need to pass any props here. App will definitely be passing props down to something that then can receive it and use it in interesting ways.